Hello summoners and welcome to another ProGuides video. My name is Christoph and in this video we're going to be talking about how to prevent yourself from getting camped and what to do when you get camped and also how to recover from certain mistakes you make when you're getting camped. A lot of you guys have been asking for it and we're here to deliver. It's without a doubt one of the most frustrating experiences and it's definitely something we all run into at some point. Feel free to leave comments or feedback down below and let us know what you want on our next video. Also, before we get into the video, I want you guys to check out our website ProGuides.com using the link below. Our Pro Pass gets you exclusive access to pro courses and coaches. On top of that, we have a great feature called InstaPro, which gives you unlimited 24/7 on-demand coaching from the best of the best. Over 100,000 gamers have used InstaPro and have ranked up significantly, so don't miss out on this opportunity and see huge improvements to your rank using the description link below. Alright, now let's get started. Getting camped is never a fun experience. A lot of players struggle and don't know what to do in these situations, and understandably so. People will often say just farm, but many times it's not even possible. Just like with many things, preventing something from happening is simply the best way to fix it. So how do you prevent yourself from getting camped? Well, the first step is to assess your matchup. Is it snowbally and does your opponent have a good gank setup? If either or both these answers to these questions is a yes, you're already a prime target for getting camped. Based off of this information, you need to consider changing up your game plan. While fighting for level 2 power spikes and all-inning with them is a great way to win lane, it inevitably causes your lane to push. Ironically, one of the most basic strategies taught to help you win games might actually jumpstart your loss. So, how do you know when you should play aggressively to push for level spikes or play passively to prevent getting camped instead? Well, it's pretty simple. You need to infer where the enemy jungler is starting their jungle route. You can take an educated guess on where the enemy jungler starts based on which laner's leashed. If the enemy top laner shows up in lane immediately when the first waves meet, while their bot lane is late to lane, it's pretty safe to assume that the enemy jungler has started bot side. This means that if you're playing top lane in this situation, you need to play respectfully and understand the enemy jungler will be able to gank you around the 3 or 4 minute mark. To avoid this, you can either allow your opponents to push or push hard enough early on to bounce the wave back to you. If your wave is still pushing towards your opponent, or if the wave is frozen near the enemy turret, you make yourself vulnerable to ganks. Manage your wave properly and ward whenever your wave crashes. By doing so, you can waste the enemy jungler's time if they try to gank you. Even if the wave is close to the enemy turret, if you've set the wave up to bounce back to you, you're under no pressure. You can sit back if you think the enemy jungler wants to gank you, since the wave will naturally come to you. The only risky situations are ones where your wave is slow pushing towards the enemy turret while the enemy jungler is nearby. In these situations, breaking freezes or even farming puts yourself in danger of a gank. Conversely, as a bot laner in this scenario, you can go for an early ward and play aggressively. Since the enemy jungler will path top, you're safe to aggress and look for favorable trades. By creating advantages while the enemy jungler can't be in your lane, this makes it difficult for them to gank your lane when they can later. Ganking for laners who are at a health disadvantage could potentially lead to a 2v3 outplay. A mid laner can ward one side early on and then infer where the enemy jungler is on their clear. Based on which side they think the enemy jungler is on, they can hug the opposite side to avoid ganks. When you're able to control the wave, make sure to take whatever precautionary steps you can in order to avoid getting ganked. Slow push and crash waves before the enemy jungler arrives in your lane, and by doing so, you can deep ward the enemy jungle and know where the enemy jungler is or isn't. Otherwise, create freezes to become ungankable during your windows of vulnerability. Next, let's talk about situations where you can't control the wave. You might know where the enemy jungler started and also know their exact pathing, but you might be in a position where you can't do anything to stop it. After a game, you might say something like, "The enemy laner just froze and I got camped, there's nothing I could do." Again, there were necessary steps to prevent this that were likely not taken. In a situation where the enemy laner has enough of a power advantage to force a freeze, you shouldn't push to begin with. The only times you can safely push in such scenarios are if your jungler is nearby or if you have vision of the enemy jungler. In cases where the enemy jungler is using their dominance to slow push the wave, you need to ask yourself why they are doing so. Sometimes it's to hit their level spikes and trade aggressively, at other times it's to set up dives. Even when getting turret dove, a lot of responsibility lies on you as a laner. Another thing you should think carefully about is the dive potential your enemy laner and jungler have. A combination of Kled and Elise can be absolutely devastating. A Soraka, Kog'Maw, and Graves trio would likely struggle to dive. If you suspect that your opponent is indeed setting up a dive, there are 3 things that you can do. The first thing you can do is thin the wave. Instead of allowing your opponent to gradually build their wave up, you can use abilities or ranged autos to clear minions and make it harder to dive you. By thinning waves, you pick up more XP and also potentially set up a freeze outside your turret. Let's say, for example, you manage to thin a wave down to 3 or 4 minions while the enemy jungler is positioned behind your turret to dive you. Instead of letting it crash into your turret and allowing your enemies to dive you, you can keep the minion wave just outside of your turret. In order to dive you, the enemy jungler would have to walk straight into your turret without minions tanking, or take the longer route around. If the enemy laner wants to force the wave to crash, they will have to fight you to do so, which will probably not be very convenient for them. Another thing you should consider when there's a heavy dive threat is that you need to avoid trading. Why is the enemy laner trying so hard to trade with you? With a wave that's slow pushing into you, they can make favorable trades to chunk you out. Not only does this give them more lane pressure, but it also sets up dives. When you know your opponents can slow push waves and set up dives with their jungler, you need to be aware of this fact. Avoid heavy trading, thin the wave when possible, and activate your health potions earlier so that you can be healthy enough to avoid or outplay a dive. Now that we've talked about how to prevent yourself from getting into those situations, we need to talk about the inevitable. What do you do when you've made mistakes and then are getting camped, and how do you recover from that? The most important moment is the first time you get ganked. How you react the first time determines how the next 5 minutes of the game plays out. This takes a lot of practice. You need to understand your champion's limits and also draw upon any previous experience you have. When you get ganked, you need to immediately assess whether or not you can escape. If you can't, it's do or die. Assess these possibilities. Can I ignore the jungler and try to kill my laner? If you've been pushing your lane, you've hopefully been able to take favorable trades. In order to set up a gank, your opponent might engage on you. Take them head on and trade kills with them if you can. Another question is, can I make the enemy jungler or laner use flash, or should I just trade with them? In the case that you can force an enemy to use flash, that's not the worst result. If the enemy jungler flashes onto you, consider whether or not you can live by flashing away. But if the enemy laner flashes on you, you should usually hold your flash. In cases where you can make them both flash, it's definitely acceptable to use your flash to trade 2 for 1. Another question you might ask is, what's the state of my wave? Is it going to push to their turret or mine? While there's very little you can do while getting ganked, if you're slow pushing a wave, you can consider clearing the remaining minions in the enemy's wave. Ultimately, you want to do whatever you can to avoid letting the enemy freeze the wave. Do whatever you can to make sure the wave pushes back to you. What's easily the most essential part of this is understanding whether or not you should use flash. The worst case scenario is that on this first gank, you end up wasting flash and still die. At that point, it'd be weird if you didn't get camped. Without flash, there's no simple way you can avoid jungle pressure coming your way. Properly playing around getting camped revolves around one fundamental that we all love, which is wave management. The best thing you can do while getting camped is making sure the wave is always near your turret and avoid trading. This makes it harder for the enemy jungler to gank, and if they want to gank, it's inevitably going to turn into a tower dive. If possible, make sure that the waves are always pushing into you. In most cases, you won't be able to hold a freeze because your opponent will be able to force you off of it. Try your best to freeze first and back off only if your opponent is pressuring you. When your wave begins to push back, make sure it pushes as slowly as possible. Even though your wave is pushing, you want to keep it close to your turret for as long as you can. Another reason for this is that if you build a big enough wave, your enemy won't be able to freeze it as easily. There's also the sticky situation where your opponent is freezing the wave and you can't break it. The first thing to note is not to make the same mistake that brought you into this situation in your next games. While you're in those situations though, there are a couple of things you can do. In order to break the freeze, you can ask your jungler for assistance. With their help, you can pressure your opponent off of the freeze and crash the wave into turret and bounce it back. Another option is to roam. If there's simply nothing else you can do, look to roam another lane and gank for them. Since your opponent wants to maintain their freeze, they don't want to follow you. By creating pressure elsewhere, you build leads for your teammates, find some extra gold or XP you wouldn't have otherwise, and potentially force your opponent to break their freeze. Seeing that you're constantly roaming, your opponent may feel the need to push to your turret to punish. While risky, roaming is one of the most effective ways to recover after getting camped. Be careful when you choose to do so. You should only do so if it's impossible to break freezes in your own lanes. If the plays go wrong, you could put your teammates behind as well, so assess whether or not you're able to successfully gank another lane. After successfully ganking off of a roam, look back at your own lane. If your opponent is stubbornly maintaining the freeze, then continue to push with the teammate you ganked for and hit the turret. A similar alternative for side laners is to reset and lane gank for the opposite side lane. Top laners need to proceed with caution, but bot laners have more freedom to attempt this rotation. Walk into the brushes of whichever side you walk to and have your teammates bait fights. Proceed to either pick up kills or pressure enemies off turrets with your wave and dive threat. The reason why this is more effective for bot laners is because of the numbers advantage it creates in the top lane. You'll be 3v1 after this rotation, while a top laner roaming would make it a 3v2. It doesn't even matter if you've managed to find kills with these rotations. The entire point of making a rotation like this is to pressure the enemy turret. By breaking a turret, you can end the laning phase and finally tear down that tent that the enemy jungler has pitched in your lane. With all that said, let's do a recap. The first step to combat getting camped is to prevent it. Consider your team comp, your matchup, and the jungle matchup, and then manage your wave accordingly. The second one is watch where the enemy jungler starts. This is paramount because it can determine whether or not you can play aggressively during the first few minutes of the game. Third, when enemies are slow pushing waves to set up dives, avoid trades and try to thin the wave. Fourth, when getting ganked, quickly assess the situation and react properly. Use flash if it'll be beneficial, hold it if you know you'll die regardless. And lastly, when enemies set up freezes so that the junglers can camp you, do your best to break the freeze. Call your jungler for help if you need it, and alternatively, roam to other lanes or rotate somewhere else to create pressure if needed. That's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember guys, you can check out our YouTube channel for more content like this, and if you guys are interested in taking your gameplay to the next level, click that description link below. That's it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck in your next few games, and we'll see you on the Rift.